Hello everyone, and welcome to Literary Tales. I'm your host, Paul Krause, and in today's episode, we focus on Ovid's Metamorphoses. Ovid was one of the great poets of antiquity, standing alongside Virgil and Horace as part of the trio of immortal Latin poets of Augustan Rome that wrote about the intensity of the passions. Ovid's Metamorphoses is a grand poetic epic, yes, epic, of the transformation of history and truth into the art form of poetry. As he concludes, "Wherever through the lands, beneath her sway, the might of Rome extends, my words shall be upon the lips of men. If truth at all is stablished by poetic prophecy, my fame shall live to all eternity." But deep within the collection of stories that serve as the pulsating heart of Ovid's finest accomplishment, there is a sparkling truth that his poetic prophecy reveals: divinization, or as he calls it, metamorphosis by love. The fame which permits Ovid to live for all eternity is through his being a poetic prophet of the power of love in our lives. By the medieval period, Ovid was studied as a canonical writer and one of the pillars of what we now call classical education. In fact, if you were to go to a classical education high school or even college, university, Ovid would be one of your required readings. Ovid's sensualism and violence were allegorized under the new Christian regime. Ovid's devotion to love was approved under the revelation of the Christian truth concerning love's transformative power, love being the highest good in life according to Christianity. The naturalistic overtures in the Metamorphoses were regarded as the natural shortcomings of the pre-Christian world. Nonetheless, they contained great truth in them. They pointed us in the right direction. His writings on violence and lust were taught as examples of what proper love is not, through the educational idea of via negativa, via negation, and how various acts of impiety lead to negative consequences in life, as they often do throughout the poem. Although Ovid was baptized into Christianity, and therefore bequeathed to the rest of the world, he was not without his detractors, most prominently and especially the English Puritans then, as he still is now, with the realities of feminism and the Me Too movement often looking at Ovid in a critical negative light. The length of Ovid's epic poem, from the creation of the world to the apotheosis of Julius Caesar, includes many myths and stories, some bleak, some uplifting. I wish to treat three of the stories contained therein to highlight one of those truths established by poetic prophecy, as Ovid says, and in doing so reclaim Ovid in today's world as we read Ovid in light of all 21st century sensitivities. The stories of Perseus and Andromeda, Pygmalion and the statue, and Acis and Galatea undoubtedly reveal the power of love and our metamorphosis by and through it. One of the issues of understanding the pagan world and psyche is the dark cosmos they inhabited. You might look back to Hesiod's Theogony to see that, or even Homer's world of capricious gods. Chaos is the oldest of the gods in Ovid's account, not too dissimilar from Hesiod's cosmos of strife, rage, and war. Humans were often the puppets of the gods, to borrow a phrase from Plato, and the fated objects of divine lust, rape, and control, as they often are in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Pious fatalism was often the best one could hope to achieve. Yet in the midst of this often dark and violent cosmos of thunderbolts and skullduggery, these three stories, among many of the other stories in Ovid's Metamorphoses, shine brighter than the sun, and give a great deal of hope to all of us humans. The Metamorphoses opens with the usual act of invoking the gods or muses. Of bodies changed to other forms I tell, you gods who have yourselves wrought ever change, inspire my enterprise and lead my lay in one continuous song from nature's first, remote beginnings to our modern times. By describing creation to us, we are made witness to the dark and chaotic cosmos. No sun as yet poured light upon the world, no waxing moon her crescent filled anew, nor in the ambient air yet hung the earth, self-balanced, equiposed, nor ocean's arms embrace the long far margin of the land. Cold essence fought with hot, and moist with dry, and hard with soft, and light with things of weight. Ovid's creation account, with chaos as the one well-named god, begins with chaos and emerges and continually forms through strife. The chaos of the cosmos is tamed by hard labor and energy, toil and sweat. In other words, strife begets strife and is only countered by an alternative form of strife, the arduous strife of work, or, as Ovid says in Latin, laborem. Although creation is not the product of love, the stories contained in Ovid's Metamorphoses often deal with love or lust, and often both, and capture the essence of the human struggle and condition, the struggle in which humans hope for their own divinization and salvation through the mysterious power of love. We are exposed, then, to two competing outlooks as to how to transform ourselves, through struggling strife or through the tenderness of love. The creation myth might be through hard conflictual labor, but by the poem's end, Ovid achieves a very subtle and radical transformation in understanding the spirit of the cosmos, as we shall see. The story of Perseus and Andromeda is a tale of faith, hope, and love triumphant. In that regard, it is indeed very rare. There is much darkness that clouds the grand story. Cassiopeia, Andromeda's mother, is a vain and haughty woman who endangers her beautiful virgin daughter by tempting Andromeda to exude vanity and claim that she is more beautiful than the Naiads. Challenging the divine hierarchy in such a way, Neptune, or Poseidon, is enraged and enchains Andromeda to be eaten by the sea monster Cetus. Medusa, the Gorgon whom Perseus slays, was also a vain woman, a feminine Narcissus, if you will, enraptured by her own beautiful hair. Seducing Neptune, she consummated their sexual lust in the virgin temple of Minerva, or Athena. This outrages Minerva and causes her to turn Medusa's beloved prize, her hair, into a nest of disgusting and repulsive snakes. Phineus, Andromeda's original prospective husband, loves not her charm and feminine physique, but the political utility that she brings. Phineus's lust for political power is the basis of his relationship with Andromeda. Despite all the skullduggery, vanity, and impiety that are interwoven into the tale, it is important to note that all those who are metamorphosized in this particular story are sinners deserving some form of punishment. Medusa must be killed for, alongside her vanity, her violation of a divine temple. Atlas must equally be turned to stone for his impious affront against Jupiter. Phineus must be slain for his lust for power and political ambitions, which wreak havoc during a wedding banquet. Though these transformations are due to just punishment for sin, the more important metamorphosis that we witness is that of Perseus and Andromeda, and that is what the story is principally concerned with. Perseus, as we know, is the son of Jove, and therefore a demigod, a sort of god-man who is part human and part divine, as many of the mythological heroes of Greek and Roman mythology are. While he is an instrument of divine judgment against sinners, he is also transformed through his deeds of heroic love and faith to the gods. It is, after all, his fides, his faith, that allows him to overcome all the monsters and obstacles that stand in his way. Minerva has instructed Perseus how to defeat Medusa. "Do not look into her eyes," the goddess implores the hero's son, before giving him a shield to protect himself. Coming upon a sleeping Medusa, contrary to the cinematic renditions of this story, Perseus uses the shield rather than his naked eyes to line up the culling blow. After decapitating the Gorgon, he places the head in a pouch to keep himself and others safe from her tremendous powers, which remain even after death. As he soars overhead on Pegasus, he comes across the innocent and beautiful Andromeda, enchained on the rocks. As Ovid makes clear, her innocence and purity demand saving. There, innocent by Jove's unjust decree, condemned to suffer for her mother's tongue, Andromeda was pinioned on a rock. Because Andromeda is free from any affront, any sin, she cannot be punished. But what causes Perseus to rescue her? It is evident that Andromeda is not deserving of the fate of being eaten by Cetus, but it is not her innocence that is the instrument of her deliverance, as much as it is Perseus's love upon seeing her. When Perseus saw her, had a wafting breeze not stirred her hair, her eyes not overflowed with trembling tears, he had imagined her a marble statue. Love, before he knew, kindled. He gazed entranced and overcome by loveliness so exquisite, so rare, almost forgot to hover in the air. It is love that delivers Andromeda from her enchainment, her prospective punishment at the hands of the gods. Moreover, and equally important, it is the sight of her face, rather than her body, that allows Perseus to recognize her as human. The face is the seat of the soul and subjectivity. This is common all throughout classical philosophy and theology. The human face brings liveliness and personality to the lifeless, soulless material world that is our bodies. It is not incidental, then, that it is the face which reveals Andromeda's true beauty and personality. After turning Cetus into stone, Perseus asks for the fair girl's name. "Reveal, I beg you, your name, and this land's name," he asks her. That Perseus asks for her name indicates his interest in her subjectivity, and not just her carnal beauty, though this is certainly included with her subjectivity and soulfulness. In rescuing her, Andromeda becomes Perseus's bride-to-be. Love here consummates itself in marriage. The two begin telling their stories to each other, thereby enlarging their lives through the intertwining of the stories that define their persons. Returning home, and grateful for Andromeda's deliverance, Cepheus and Cassiopeia arrange for their daughter's marriage to Perseus. The wedding banquet, of course, is disrupted by Phineus, a rash ringleader of war, Ovid says. Phineus, as we've mentioned, was the original promised suitor of Andromeda. However, his interest in Andromeda was moved for purely political reasons. He never loved her, and doesn't love her, as Perseus does. This is revealed in Cepheus's rebuke. "Is this your thanks for such great service? This, the dower you pay for her life saved? It was Perseus who took her from you. If you want the truth, it was the Nereids and Neptune's wrath. It was the horned Ammon. It was the sea monster who came to feast feast upon my flesh and blood. You lost her then, when her death was sure, unless her death indeed is what you want, and mean my grief to ease your cruel heart. With or without her breathing soul by his side, Phineus could claim his legitimacy to power through his betrothal to Andromeda. It mattered not if she lived or died on that rock. Lust, specifically the lust for power, brings chaos to the political realm. After all, it is in the palace and the social environ that this part of the tale takes place. Love brings serene harmony to politics. The many lords and ladies, bards and citizens that attend the wedding enjoy the fruits of love in marriage. This is disturbed, as Ovid's recounting of the story entails, through the lust for power and the ambition that comes with it. Love, nevertheless, triumphs in the end. In the maelstrom of battle, Phineus and his band of marauding warriors are defeated. Perseus turns them each into stone. After defeating Phineus, Perseus and Andromeda seal their love for each other in a beautiful and fertile marriage, which is itself a form of metamorphosis. Perseus and Andromeda wed. Their marriage brings forth many children. The metamorphosis of Perseus and Andromeda is through love. In the midst of sin and darkness, chaos and war, love emerged triumphant and brought forth the greatest transformation of all, the bonding of two flesh as one in marriage. One of the most charming, if not peculiar, stories contained in Ovid's Metamorphoses is the tale of Pygmalion and the statue. Pygmalion is a sculptor, and a damned good sculptor. What he creates is almost lifelike, the closest stone, marble, and ivory can be to living flesh and blood. When we are introduced to Pygmalion, he is suffering loneliness and general resentment to the female sex. As Ovid sings, Pygmalion had seen these women spend their days in wickedness, and horrified at all the countless vices nature gives to womankind, lived celibate and long, lacked the companionship of married love. We can infer from the introduction to Pygmalion's plight that he had been spurned by love and was aghast at the degenerate morals of the people, women especially, around him. With his love spurned, Pygmalion descends into a celibate and lonely isolation, where he crafts female statues as a coping mechanism for his lonely plight. During his plight, he crafts a statue so beautiful and lifelike that it almost appears to be alive. Meanwhile, he carved his snow ivory with marvelous, triumphant artistry, and gave it perfect shape, more beautiful than ever woman born. His masterwork fired him with love. It seemed to be alive, its face to be a real girl's face. Beauty's face lit a fire deep inside the cold and tempered heart of Pygmalion, and he raced to the festival of Venus, the goddess of love, to say some prayers. Pygmalion's admiration of beauty, the power of beauty, literally brought new life to him. Beauty also pushes him to Venus to offer up pious prayers. Vouchsafe, O gods, if all things you can grant, my bride shall be the living likeness of my ivory girl, he says. It might be easy to condemn Pygmalion as a young boy going through puberty, but that misses the gentle introduction, where his prior love seems to have been spurned, leading him into the pit of despair and loneliness that he is in. Nay, rather than mock Pygmalion for his flurry of passion, we should understand how the new life in Pygmalion came to be. Love discovered and mediated through beauty. Moreover, Pygmalion is a pious man in this new life. His prayers to Venus serve as a testament to his piety. Because Pygmalion is pious, his prayers shall be granted. After saying his prayers, Pygmalion rushes home and grasps the statue he had made once more. In a dazzling display of rhetorical and linguistic skill, Ovid describes the scene. Incupensque tora didit ascula vise tempera est, ad movitos et terram manibus quoque, pactora temptat, temptatum mollecit iber positicre rigore, subsidit digitis cedique. Where she lay he kissed her, and she seemed warm to the touch. So, kissing her again and caressing her breasts, the ivory grew soft in his fingers, and its hardness vanished into flesh. As the statue transformed to warm, living flesh and blood, she became alive. With the statue now a woman, Pygmalion poured his thanks to Venus, and at last his lips pressed real lips, and she, his girl, felt every kiss, and blushed, and shyly raised her eyes to his, and saw the world and him. The goddess graced the union she had made, and when 9 times the crescent moon had filled her silver orb, an infant girl was born. This short and admittedly amusing story is one of the most powerful and deep in the Metamorphoses. The story of Pygmalion communicates how beauty and love bring life to a cold and lonely world. Beauty and love resurrect Pygmalion, if you will, and lead him to a marriage with the ultimate life-giving event, the ultimate metamorphosis as its culmination, childbirth. Pygmalion's salvation and the humanization of a cold, empty statue, representative of the cold, empty, loveless matter, is through the life-giving power of beauty and love itself. Beauty and love, in this story, go together. If beauty is to save the world, then this also entails that love will save the world, just as it did Pygmalion and Galatea. Galatea became the traditional naming of Pygmalion's statue, though Ovid leaves the statue-turned beautiful snow-white woman unnamed. The story of Acis and Galatea is another one of the great love stories, and perhaps tragic love stories, contained in Ovid's epic. By now it should be apparent that many of the stories that Ovid tells are tales of love, and also tales of lust. While Acis and Galatea is a far more somber story, we still get a foretaste of divinization in Acis's rebirth into a god. The tragic love story of Acis and Galatea is sandwiched between the pilgrimage of Aeneas in the Metamorphoses. It begins as an aside of stories that provide basic contextual background to the places that Aeneas and the pilgrimaging Trojans venture. Our story begins with Scylla combing Galatea's hair before inquiring why she continues to turn down various suitors. Galatea explains by talking of her memory of love with Acis. He was 16, the down upon his cheek, scarce yet a beard, and he was beautiful. He was my love, but I was Cyclops' love, who wooed me endlessly, and if you ask whether my hate for him or love for Acis was stronger in my heart, I could not tell. The ending of the story, however, reveals that her love for Acis was more powerful than her hatred of Polyphemus. Polyphemus, the one-eyed Cyclops, is the undeniable villain of this story. The shepherd giant is described as a vile and monstrous creature, as most shepherds were, indicative of the Roman and Greek distrust of nomadic peoples, whom they called the barbarians. Polyphemus is also described as a lustful giant and maniac. He has coursing through his veins a wild urge to kill and a lust for blood. Polyphemus is no beautiful, handsome, and tender suitor, as is Acis. The love of Acis and Galatea is one of rich and deep purity. Acis and Galatea are gentle and honest lovers who embrace one another in their subjectivity. Unlike many tales where the love of mortal and divine is usually the lust of the divine to control the mortal, there is no indication that Galatea lusted to control Acis as Circe or Calypso did to Odysseus or Zeus to Ganymede. Instead, the love between Acis and Galatea is pure. They share their joys and personalities with each other, which enrages the bestial Polyphemus. The lament of Polyphemus could have been the episode of redemption for the giant, but instead it turns into the catalyst for his rage. I'll gouge his living guts, I'll rend his limbs, and strew them to the fields and into the sea, the vicious Cyclops screams. Chancing upon them as a predator waiting to ambush, Polyphemus's coldness comes to the fore when he says, I see you now, I shall make sure that loving fond embrace shall be your last. Polyphemus springs upon them like a lion. The attack startles Galatea, who dives into the sea, and causes Acis to run up the mountainside. In despair, Acis calls out, Help, Galatea! Father, mother, help! All to no avail. Polyphemus continues to chase the young man until he crushes him with a rock. Polyphemus retreats back to his blood-soaked cave, a murderer. But the gods, the fates, take pity on Galatea and Acis. As Galatea recounts, But I, it was all the fates permitted me, caused Acis to assume ancestral powers. Acis is subsequently resurrected as a divine river spirit. Acis there himself, changed to a river god, and still the same, his waters keep that legendary name. Acis overcomes death because of love. His blood spills out over the countryside. His blood is transformed into a divine river spirit, precisely because he loved and was beloved. Furthermore, the memory of love is the driving spirit of this story. In a rare instance of first-person, third-person blurring, this particular story is told from the persona of Galatea, rather than the poet Ovid. The memory of love, we realize, is what prevents Galatea from taking on new suitors. The memory of love is what also ensures Acis's immortality. Acis's love for Galatea and her receptivity to that love is the unbreakable bond that brought Acis back from the grave in the form of a river god and keeps Galatea forever his, despite the many suitors now pursuing the beauty of Galatea. The story of Galatea and Acis, while somber and dark, reminds us that love conquers death. Though Acis is killed, he is resurrected, if you will, and takes on a new, divine form. The only reason why Acis takes on a new form is because of the love he shared with Galatea. Without love, Acis would have remained sinking into the ground. For dust he was, and to dust he would have returned, if not for the salvific power of love. Additionally, the story communicates the power of love through memory. Love does not die with the mangling and rotting of the body. Love endures forever in the blessed realm of memory. The memory of love ensures that love never dies. A certain bishop of Hippo would later have much to say on this topic of love and memory. It is true that there is extensive violence throughout the Metamorphoses. Consider the extensiveness of violence in two of the stories we have just sampled. In part, this is the reality of Ovid's understanding of the world. Love and violence often did go together and do go together. This too is a great achievement of Ovid, because he lays bare the gratuity and violence that accompanied his world. He doesn't hide the fact that sex and violence are widespread. Nevertheless, Ovid also reveals how love, sweet and tender, caressing love, breaks through in this bleak and violent cosmos. There are stories of transformation that lead to shock and revulsion, and stories of transformation that lead to ecstatic endearment and tears. The stories of metamorphosis by love, especially that tender and compassionate love, are the tales that still stick. Ovid's Metamorphoses is many things. In its most fundamental form, Ovid's epic love poem of many stories reveals deep truths in its poetic proclamations of the transformative power and spirit of love. The truth revealed by Ovid's grand love epic is how love transforms us, love renews us, and love constitutes the pulsating heart of life. Despite all the chaos and flux we deal with, despite all the violence and objectification, despite all the cruelty and even death, love remains the one constancy of the cosmos, standing alongside all the various manifestations of strife. Love manages to creep into the cosmos that was, as the creation myth retells, not the product of love, but chaotic strife. Thus, Ovid achieves the poetic metamorphosis of the entire creation story. He transforms the cosmos of chaos and strife into a cosmos of love, with the possibility, however brief, of serenity in love, even if it is engulfed in the darkness of violence and bloodshed. The Metamorphoses does not offer anything new by detailing a cosmos in a state of perpetual flux, strife, and change. Heraclitus and Lucretius had already posited this notion in their works, and of course that is the cosmos of Hesiod in the Theogony. What Ovid's Metamorphosis does offer as new in comparison to prevailing Greek and Roman views of the world is how love is the one constant in this cosmos of flux and violence. Love, as we have seen, brings life into a world of death and sin. Love, tied with beauty, renews the world. Love endures even after death, and is the very spirit of transformation over the grave. When Pythagoras speaks of the constancy of the soul in Book 15, Ovid reveals his understanding of the soul as the constancy of love which permeates the poem. To integrate Pythagoras and Ovid, as I think this is the message of the Metamorphoses, love is the same forever, but adopts new migrations in ever-varying forms. The pilgrim souls that Pythagoras speaks of are nothing less than the loving souls on a pilgrimage of love through the cosmos, being tossed about and torn in its chaos and violence. When Ovid concludes the poem with the word vivam, I shall live, he lives eternally through the love he prophesied about. For he himself was a pilgrim soul, hoping to be transformed by the power of love. No fire can destroy, no sword can cut, no age can forget the truth that love is the constant guiding spirit of the cosmos, no matter how much darkness, violence, and bloodshed surrounds it.